Welcome back. Today, we're diving deep into a really powerful idea from the Reserve Bank of India, something they call infrastructure, India's Growth Express. It's a perfect title because that's exactly what we're going to talk about.
It's the big question on everyone's mind. How does India actually become a developed nation by 2047? It's a huge goal, right? But what's the real roadmap? What's the engine that's actually going to power that massive journey? Well, according to this analysis, the answer is surprisingly clear. While, of course, a lot of things have to go right, the RBI points to one single, powerful engine that can drive this whole thing forward: a massive, sustained push in infrastructure. So, here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to define what this engine actually is. Then, we'll decode where its power comes from. We'll look at India's big infrastructure push, tackle the massive financing challenge, and then wrap it all up with the key takeaways you'll need. All right, first things first. When we throw around a huge word like infrastructure, what are we really talking about? Because, it's so much more than just roads and bridges. The RBI Bulletin breaks it down into three main pillars. First, you've got physical infrastructure. This is the hardware of the economy, the stuff you can see and touch, like roads, ports, and power lines. Then there's social infrastructure, which is the foundation for our people, think schools and hospitals. And finally, the new giant in the room, digital infrastructure. This is the modern utility that powers everything from UPI payments to working from home. And hey, for all you exam aspirants watching, here is a piece of jargon you absolutely need to know. Social infrastructure is often called social overhead capital. Why? Because it's the foundational investment that supports all other economic activity. It's a classic term, so make sure you remember that one. Okay, so now we know what infrastructure is, but why is it so powerful? What is the economic magic that happens when a country really invests in this stuff? The secret sauce, the real magic here, comes down to one core economic idea. The power of spending on infrastructure isn't just about the direct jobs it creates building a highway. No, it's about the ripple effect it sends through the entire economy. It's called the multiplier effect. And boom, here's another one for your notebooks, the multiplier effect. Seriously, you will see this everywhere. It's the idea that every single rupee the government spends on infrastructure doesn't just add 1 rupee to the economy. Instead, it generates more than 1 rupee in national income by creating demand, jobs, and pulling in private investment. Okay, so how big is this multiplier in India? Well, get this. This is the crucial number. The RBI estimates that for every single rupee spent on capital expenditure, our GDP grows by somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 rupees. Just let that sink in for a second. That's not just a good return on investment, it's a phenomenal one, and it's the core reason why this strategy is so important. So that's the theory, and it sounds amazing, right? But is India actually doing it? Is this happening in the real world? Let's take a look at the hard data. It all kicks off with government spending, or what we call Capex. And as you can see from this chart, wow, the surge has been absolutely dramatic. Just a decade ago, back in 2013-14, the spending was about 1.9 lakh crore. This year, the budget is for 10.2 lakh crore. That's the push right there in the numbers. And what happens when the government spends all that money? Well, this chart shows you the direct effect. This is the index of infrastructure industries. It tracks core stuff like steel and cement. Look at how it's grown, almost in perfect sync with the government spending, going from an index of about 105 to over 157. It's a crystal clear link. When investment goes up, output follows. Now, this push isn't just random spending. It's being driven by 3 flagship programs you absolutely need to know. First, the National Infrastructure Pipeline, or IMP, that's the master plan. Second, the National Monetization Pipeline, or NMP, which is a really clever way to fund new projects by leasing out existing ones. And third, PM Gati Shakti, which is the high-tech digital platform that brings everyone together to plan better and cut down on delays. Okay, so the ambition is huge. The plans are in motion. But, and this is a big but, none of this comes cheap. Building out a nation's infrastructure is incredibly expensive, which brings us to the single biggest hurdle: financing. Yeah, it's the elephant in the room, isn't it? Where did the trillions of rupees needed every single year actually come from? The government can kickstart it, for sure, but they can't do it all alone. And here's why funding infrastructure is so uniquely difficult. First, these projects take forever to start making money. You build a port today, it might be years before it's profitable. That's a huge problem for regular banks, which brings us to something called an asset-liability mismatch. Basically, banks take our short-term deposits but have to lend for very long-term projects. That's risky. Plus, the upfront costs are just enormous, and delays can make those costs spiral out of control.
All right, so we've laid out the problem. It is a massive challenge. So what's the solution? How is India trying to innovate its way around these hurdles? Let's dive into that, and then we'll wrap everything up for you.
A huge part of the solution is this brand new institution, NAFID. Please remember this name. It's a special kind of bank called a Development Finance Institution, or DFI. Its one and only job is to provide that stable, long-term money that infrastructure projects desperately need. And since it was only set up in 2022, you can bet it's going to be a hot topic for exams.
But NAFID isn't the only tool in the box. India is building out a whole financial toolkit to get this done. You've got things like securitization, which helps banks free up their cash to lend more. We're seeing a rise in municipal bonds, which lets cities like Pune or Indore raise their own money for their own projects. And we're also tapping into global money through external commercial borrowings. So let's bring it all home. If you take away just 5 things from our discussion today, make it these. 1. Infrastructure is the chosen engine for India's 2047 developed nation goal. 2. Its power comes from that all-important multiplier effect, that massive boost to GDP for every rupee spent. 3. We've seen in the data that rising government spending is directly fueling growth. 4. The key schemes to remember are NIP, NMP, and PM Gati Shakti. And finally, number 5, financing is the #1 challenge, and new solutions like NAFID are the answer. And that really leaves us with the final forward-looking question. The ambition to build a new India is clear. The plans are in place. The construction is happening all around us. The defining challenge for the next decade and beyond will be this. Can India innovate its financial system fast enough to pay for the incredible future it is building? It's going to be fascinating to watch. Thanks for joining us.